space.
How many have you got? Oh, that'll do. Now, what I wanted was some information that's not in the books that you can remember of people a long time ago, or things that you've heard about people from a long time ago. Like, well, where do we start? You familiar with this? Do you need your glasses or? Let's see. Do you know anything? Remember this?
About John Skinner.
Now, where do we start?
That's John Skinner. Do you want my John Skinner?
Well, anything you know about anyone all the way back. Maybe you're more familiar with this book. I'm not sure. Which one you're more? Yeah, little things you know about them. What were they like, or what have you heard about them?
Well, we know that our father was Church of England, and that he used to ring the bells in the church. And I think it says somewhere there was some talk of him going into ministry.
That's your father?
Yes, yes. And his father, his wife died. I think it tells about that. His wife died and left him with the 4 children. John, the eldest, my father, and William and George, and who was the other one? His sister Mary, 4 of them. And then he had a housekeeper, and he married the housekeeper and had quite a number of children to her.
So you had quite a few in all?
Yes, quite a number. So much so that, of course, she neglected the stepmother neglected the first 4, and they didn't get the proper nutrition they should have had. So Dad had rickets when he was a boy, and bow legs because of it, you know, the bones.
He used to take sort of turns, I think. But Mum said that once they were married, he never had any that sort of thing. So it would appear that it was
lack of good nutrition.
Yes.
And he used to, he was a local preacher even in those days, and used to always walk from one church to the other to preach. He'd walk quite a distance in a day, wouldn't he, from what Mum said, you know, quite, it was like 26 miles, something like that, to preach in various places. And he liked the simpler form of worship with the Wesleyan chapel.
So he was Methodist?
So he
well, he really came out, he said, like in a revival, Wesleyan revival. And,
almost charismatic, perhaps.
Yes, and they called them, of course, Wesleyans in those days. And we had a photo of John Wesley hanging up.
Oh, yeah?
Yes, in our dining room, because he'd been the founder.
Dad admired him very much as a man.
And he loved the hymns that he wrote.
Oh, I don't blame him, really.
No, we don't either, because we love the hymns, Charles and John Wesley's hymns.
And Isaac Watts.
Yes, they're what I call real hymnology. Real hymns.
Of course, Dad couldn't hold a tune, and neither could his sister. And Mother said that his sister Mary was the only one who could put her out of tune. She was so poor that she even put Mum out of tune, which was rare because Mum had a very true voice.
Yes, and I believe Dad's brother, William, not any of them were singers at all. They couldn't hold a tune.
No.
I didn't hear many of them being able to, did you?
No, but they enjoyed it, you know.
But they loved music.
And they joined in heartily.
Yes,
unfortunately.
Yes, and yes, and Dad, he really loved to hear Mother sing, particularly. He was very, very proud of Mother's beautiful voice.
And of course he liked to hear her reciting. And that was when he first saw her. And she was reciting at the Band of Hope meeting.
Oh,
and quite a long poem.
she would have had quite an English accent.
Yes.
So therefore that would have sounded quite
It
refined, I suppose,
it
compared
would,
to everyone
yes.
else.
As we look back, it was a beautiful diction, and they said their words clearly, and they spoke well, both Mum and Dad, although we used to laugh at them because
They sounded so
Yes.
English. And you're saying that she could remember poems
very well.
like you?
Yes, long
Like both of you,
poems,
yeah.
they were long ones.
there was one she used to say, "'Twas Saturday night."
And then she'd say it again. The title was "'Twas Saturday Night." "'Twas Saturday night. The busy streets were paved with rich and poor. All seemed engaged but a working man who stood at the gin shop door. He watched neat couples wend their way to well-stored shops hard by. As he watched their purchases, he heaved a bitter sigh. He thought of his dark and wretched home with wife and children there, and blushed as he shook his empty purse and thought of his cupboards bare. Alas, he said, what a fool I am to waste all my money away when I earn enough to buy a good meal each day. And it goes on to say that
As he thought, his wandering eyes espied his daughter Jane, came running to his side. And what happened then?
well, she was barefoot, and he was so ashamed that he decided then and there to give it up. So it goes on,
And then the last line that we used to love. Next Saturday night, he decided to turn away from the drink, you see, one thing and another. And next Saturday night, with a bosom light and calm, he took his way to market with his wife upon his arm. We used to wait for that. It was like, the lovely end to a story. That was lovely.
Did you ever have any family times, special times you were all supposed to be there for dinner or something?
Oh, Christmas dinner, we always had Christmas
yeah,
dinner.
yes.
Together, and there was the plum pudding, and we thought it was a bore, the plum pudding. We could hardly eat it after everything else, but you see, Mum used to put the threepences in it.
We'd chew away when we got the threepence.
We'd be nearly bursting, wouldn't we?
Yes, we would.
And there was great excitement, of course, Christmas night. We just couldn't sleep. There was so bubbling over with excitement, and looking in the pillow slips, every so often.
Failing to see if Sandra had gone.
Yes, and then our brother Bill would make it very realistic when he'd say, hurry up, you twins, too late. Father Christmas has just gone round the corner.
Yeah, God's gone down the lane.
He's gone down the lane.
And one time he left us canaries in a cage, Father Christmas. I think
And
Bill had something to do
they were dear little canaries, and when we played the pedal organ, they'd sing like
Or
anything.
even the sewing machine.
Yes,
You
even the
remember?
sewing
Yes.
machine, they'd sing.
Oh, they'd sing their little
Yes.
hearts out.
Yes, and then I don't know what we did, but one morning we found them like little round balls, and they were gone. We must have picked a weed. They're supposed to be thistles, you see,
Yes,
that
well,
you
they
pick from
could have
them.
been in the feed.
Could have been, yes, but I think it must have been something we picked, because they were both gone. Of course, we had a grand funeral for them.
Yes.
Yeah, we had our dogs in prams
We
and
had
the
a
cat.
We had a cemetery for all our.
And I remember, I think we had a difference of opinion as to who'd be the preacher and who'd be the organist, the organ being played on a box, you see, whatever it would be. We'd sing solemnly, but we both wanted to be the preacher to give the oration for them. And then we were looking forward so much to poor old Tom going, because he was old, our tomcat. And Bill used to threaten to get rid of him, but anyway, we had this little cemetery, you see, and we had a little bird that had broken its wing. We picked it up. We tried to revive it. We made bread and milk for it, and we wrapped it in a piece of toweling, and we'd run to the cage with it warm from the oven and wrap it in, because it was shaking all the time. The poor little thing had gone by morning, so that was another cause for the funeral. And we had quite a little cemetery, you see, and we done it off so that the horses couldn't tread on it. then of course when we came home one time from a little holiday, where was old Tom? Well, Bill
Fine.
said, well, he died. Is that enough?
What do you know about your grandparents?
Well, we never met them, unfortunately.
You didn't meet any of your grandparents?
No.
Not any.
Of course, they'd be back in England.
That's right.
No.
What have you heard about them?
Well,
The grandfather Towel was he was full of fun, and Grandma Towel was rather prim, I think, but correct, you see. And sometimes she had to say, "Now that's enough, Samuel." It was Samuel, wasn't he?
No.
Was he James? James.
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 It'd be James, yeah.
That'll be enough,
Yes.
Jim.
yes. Well, you see, she came from really the gentry, and he came from the working class, which was very much pronounced in those days.
Mm.
We don't have that now, but and she was really a lady, and but anyway, they had a big family.
Yes.
And they got on well, and of course she had a beautiful singing voice, and two of her daughters, Mum and a sister, sang beautifully, but she wasn't able to have them trained. Like she was trained by her mother, who had...
Because she'd gone down a class,
Yes.
didn't have the money now.
Yes.
Mm.
Well, the mother didn't have the money. Her mum's mother, grandma, didn't have the money because, see, her husband left her,
Mm.
and her husband left her and joined a circus troupe and went away. But she was determined, because she had had good training and that sort of thing, because she had come from rather wealthy people, I believe, that her daughter would be trained. So although Grandma had to go to different homes as a seamstress to have enough money to live on, because they didn't have any other means of support in those days, she saw to it that her daughter was trained.
That's our great-grandma.
Yes,
Parker.
our great-grandma, her name was Parker.
That's your great-grandma.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mm.
What do you know about her? Anything or not really? Only that.
That she was the belle of Chittlehampton, a lovely looking girl, and that she married this, he was a Sawyer, Parkham.
He was from the working class, you see, and she really married, as Mum said, beneath her. That's how they spoke of it in those days. That wasn't in any way being snobbish, but that was just the way that it was. And
So who was the one who joined the circus? This is your great-grandfather.
yes, great-grandfather Parkham.
He went and joined the circus, and he's the one who came back and got stoned.
That's
or
right,
something?
yes. And Mother never did mention it to us, not in all the years.
But it was over 20 years, wasn't it?
Yes, later he came back.
And the villagers hadn't forgotten, and they stoned him out of the town. And Mum never mentioned it. Mum never mentioned that to anyone.
She wouldn't have known him, would she? Really?
No, Mum wouldn't have known.
No.
But
No.
we know that they were married, and they have the birth certificate and so on of the little Mum's mother, and their marriage certificate. So
I wonder what her parents felt like when she married a lower class.
Well,
You
we
wouldn't know, would you?
know, but she certainly didn't, it appears that she didn't want to go back to them, but rather that she went round as a seamstress, and that was sewing by hand, because there wouldn't be the machines like there is today, and she did beautiful work, because Mother brought out a quilt that Grandma Parkin did, and it was absolutely beautiful. It was hand done. A big, you'd call it the king size now, wouldn't you?
yes, you would.
Yes, a quilt, a patchwork quilt. It was most beautifully done, and even on the, when you turned it over, there was the most beautiful flower design at the back. That was to keep it in place, but instead of just stitching any old how, There was the most beautiful design. I wish we still had it.
Yes.
What happened to it?
I don't know what happened to it. Mother would take it off in summertime and put it away until
I
winter.
don't know what happened to it.
And Mother always had two mattresses. She had the feather mattress for the winter, and that was duly put aside in the summer and brought out again for the winter. And of course she made the mattress herself from the softest of feathers from the fowls that we would have to kill, you know, to eat them. And Mum took a pride in seeing it was only the downy feathers, you know, more like an eider down. Some of the people at the time, they'd use any old feathers for the pillows or for the eider downs, but Mum would carefully pick out the very softest of them and sun them and air them. And of course, it remained beautiful as long as the material didn't last. It'd be
And
beautiful.
also pillows that I regret to say that Elsie and I had a fight one time. You know, the four-poster bed, and we're hitting each other with the pillows, and one of them split, and the feathers came out everywhere, even in the house. Mum wasn't pleased about that.
Well, what about Grandma and Grandfather Skinner?
We don't know a great deal about them at all.
Because of his wife passing away so young, really, we don't know a great deal about them, only that that the Skinners had this trade, and it had as far back as the Skinners could be traced, wheelwright and cabinet maker, and they made beautiful furniture, and there's a real art in the wheelwright trade. It's a real art to do it. Of course, they'd have been well needed in those days with the carriages, you know. They'd have had a very good profession or a good trade, and they were comfortably off, Mother said, and because we have some of the silver teaspoons and it's monogrammed, they must have been comfortably off. So that's, we don't know a great deal about the ancestry of them apart from that.
We didn't realise, in Mother's side of it, of the family, the Towels, that when Mother and her sister went out to service, as they called it, that was domestic servants, they worked for an aunt, and she lived in a beautiful big place called Cobden Villa, and she must have been among the gentry that the grandmother had left, because it was a beautiful place. And although it was their auntie, would it be?
Yes, it would be their auntie, I think.
Auntie.
It might be their great auntie.
I wouldn't know, but there was no privileges for them as servants. They had, it was a case of once you go downstairs, you stay downstairs. But Mother did have, the aunt let her look after the silver, which evidently was
an honour to be entrusted with it. She had to count it all, counted to see that it was all there and it was all kept clean and ready for
It must have been a very big place, because Mum always said that her auntie, Mother always showed us how to set the table nicely, and she said that her aunt showed her how to set tables. She didn't say set a table, but set tables, which seemed to infer that there would be quite a number of tables and really big rooms, you know, really big rooms.
And of course they were dressed nicely, as the photo shows, you know, in their caps and their aprons. Yes. And we've told you about Mother seeing a poor old man getting something from, they wouldn't call it the garbage tin in those days, they'd call it probably a dust bin, and she saw him trying to get some tea leaves out, and when she saw him he said, "Oh, don't tell anybody," and she said, "Why?" He said, "Because they'll send us to the poorhouse, my wife and me, if they know that we're starving."
And that was the dread of people in those days, the poorhouse, that they'd rather die than go to the poorhouse. So it must have been a pretty poor place.
And, yes, and so Mother felt so touched that she'd go with the only meal that was worth having, the midday meal, and she'd run quickly. She'd see that they didn't need her upstairs, and she'd run quickly with her dinner to where they lived and give it to them and run back. And if she saw that the bell pull was swinging, she'd know they'd run, and she'd go running up the stairs. And she didn't let on that she did that for many months, and she did it to her own detriment, really. She was almost anemic because I don't know what kind of breakfast they'd have, but that was the main meal of the day. Then they'd have more like a high tea or scones and jam and that kind of thing for their tea. So it meant that as a young girl she was missing the main meal of the day, and it really did harm to her.
Mm.
But I don't know how long that lasted, and Mum only told that not long before she died, didn't she? She told me when she stayed with me, and I hadn't heard that before, and so Elsie didn't have it in her book, did you?
No.
Pity. Really, we didn't know about it, but Mother told me quite a few things when she was with me last, you know, because her sight was failing, and so when I could, I'd sit beside her and
listen.
she'd tell me things.
What other things did she tell you
Oh,
that aren't in the book or aren't?
yes. Well, of course, she used to make bread when she was only 3 or 4 years old. She was helping her mother make bread because she went out to work at how old?
Nine. And her
yes,
sister was 7, wasn't
Yes.
she? And Uncle Alf Tow, Mum's brother, he was only 7 when he went onto a farm to work, and he was only such a little boy, of low stature, that he'd have to get the big horses, the Clydesdales, and get them up near a stump and try to get on the stump to harness them because
Or a fence or something,
fence,
yes.
yes. And of course,
before Mother went to work for the auntie, she went to a place for a butcher and his wife, and they called him Butcher Burgess. Always not Mr. Burgess or the butcher, but Mum always spoke to him as Butcher Burgess. And Mum, that would be before she was 9, but it wasn't far from her mother because she could wave to her mother. But she said in the early morning, she'd go to hang clothes on the line, and it'd be snowing, and Butcher Burgess's trousers would be so stiff that she could hardly hang them on the line, and her poor little hands were blue with the cold, absolutely blue with the cold.
and I think she went up, used to go with her sisters and brothers up to the squire's place, and they'd give them some milk, wouldn't they?
I don't remember that.
And they'd open the gates, the carriage gates, and they'd sometimes give them a farthing.
Yes, that was, yes, and when when the hunt was on.
This is your mother.
The hunt, yes.
Mother.
When the hunt was on, the hounds and that through the village, they'd run and open the gates and they'd throw them a couple of farthings.
And Mother could manage with a farthing to get enough, was it called Rocky Road?
Yes, Rocky Road, whatever that was.
Like a toffee type of thing. And she had so many, she always had one child on her back to carry
This
them.
is before she went to
Yeah, and
service.
she'd always have one on her back. And she'd managed to get enough for the farthing, and she'd portion it out amongst them all. The only thing is she'd forgotten that she didn't have a little bit. It'd be all gone, but she wouldn't mention it to them. But,
It was such a rare treat.
so,
And,
yes.
and quite often when they were all home, they couldn't afford meat, and they used to go to the butcher and get what they call cracklings. That was from the pork, and they'd just have some cracklings and potatoes, which they grew in their backyard. And Mum said it was rather nice because it was very cold, and the cracklings were tasty, and with the potatoes, yes. Cracklings and potatoes.
Mum loved the English bluebells that grew in the meadows, and I think they used to gather them and try to sell them too
Yes.
at the gates, you know. That's
And when she was married, she had Lily of the Valley.
on a bonnet. And she made her own frock and a bonnet for a wedding, and for her sister. She gave her sister Polly, or was it Mary? Who was it? Was a bridesmaid? It'd be Polly, wouldn't it? Was
I don't
Polly?
remember really.
Well, she made her bridesmaid frock for her too, and paid it all from her own earnings because the family couldn't afford it.
Of course, that dress lasted for many years. Many years. When she came out to Australia, it was still her best frock, and she had very few frocks, but she was always well dressed and very particular about her appearance.
And so I said in the book about that frock, it was really a woman frock with sateen trimmings on, and the trimmings on the sleeves pointed up, and in the little waist, which was only, was it 21-inch waist Mother had?
Something like that.
Very small waist. And she'd had this same frock, you see, for John and Albert and Bill and Albert and Ada, and then Susie came, the next one on the list, and she thought she'd love to have a new frock for the christening, see, because she was Methodist, or Wesleyan Methodist, and she knew she couldn't afford it, so she unpicked the frock and she turned it and dyed it. She was very good with dyeing, and she wore that, and it came up fresh looking and nice, and she could still wear it with the same waist after that was 5 children.
21-inch waist after 5 children.
Yes, we still have it here.
And she had a size 2 shoe.
You've still got the dress here, have you?
No, I've got the waist,
Yes.
the sateen
It's so
waist.
tiny.
Yes,
It's unbelievably small.
yes,
And
I'll show it to you.
a size
Donna.
2 shoe. And I can remember years ago a strange thing happening. I was only a girl, and Mother asked me would I brush her hair, and I loved doing that. And her hair was lovely, and she had lovely shoulders. And I was brushing the hair, and I remember saying to her, "Mum," I said one day, I said, "You were meant to be a lady." She said, "I hope I am." I said, "No," I said, I think, you know, that you should sort of be rich and have wear lavender and lace." And Mum said, "Don't talk nonsense." But in fact, she didn't tell us, but that's where she should have been, because that's where she came from, that type of living where there was, you know, they were so well dressed, and I didn't know anything about mothers then, about the grandfather and the mother having left her station in life to marry a wealthy person.
So in other words, her grandmother, who was brought up like that,
yes,
had it flow through.
Yes.
And somehow I sensed it, but I knew nothing about it. And Mum said, "Don't talk nonsense." And it was only after we heard about Grandfather Parkin and grandmother being married like that, that I remembered saying it to her. But I remember distinctly and thinking, and I said, "You know, I'd like to see you in a ball dress with a sort of low cut and, you know, a nice back, and see plenty of her back." And Mum said, "Don't talk nonsense." But she had very fine skin, and Dad used to say she was plump as a little partridge.
Well, she was very petite, was she?
Yes.
Yeah.
Very short as well, or not?
Very short and dainty.
And dainty.
And always dainty and
Well,
always clean.
size 2 shoe, I take a 4, and that's normal size. Well, 2 is very, very. Of course, later years she had to have a little bigger because,
A big swell, a bit.
you know.
But your father was fairly heavy build, or not
Well,
particularly?
he was stocky.
Mm.
He was stocky, but he wasn't really very tall. We thought he was tall, but of course he became
Of
so
course.
crippled.
And yet when when I first came to McLean, the Aborigines used to call him the tall white man.
His skin was very white,
Yes.
and because of his black beard, his white
No,
skin looked...
something like Keith Collins. I would think.
although not as tall as
No,
Keith.
not as tall as
And- and
Keith.
he
How
was-
tall would he have been?
Oh, I wouldn't
Would he
know.
be 6 feet or not?
Well, he'd be touching 6 feet, I would think, then,
Yeah.
because he became so stooped with
And so
the
crippled
rheumatism and that.
and bent over. But
Mm.
I think he was quite handsome
Mm.
in his way.
Mm.
And Mother had rosy cheeks, but his skin was just a pure white look and showed
And
a
very black
of his-
hair.
Very
And,
black
and
hair.
of course he still had nice black hair when he died at 62.
62.
Yes.
We thought of him always as an old man, you know.
Because he was so bent over and crippled up
Yes.
that
Mm.
actually he wasn't old.
No, my dad is that age.
Yes, and going
Yes.
up on the boat one day to Grafton, on the shilling trips to Grafton, we were clustering round Father. He was a rare treat for Dad to leave work to go up. There must have been a
I don't
reason.
even remember that.
And,
Okay.
and Mum said that we were both clinging on to Dad, and someone nearby said, "Don't the children love their grandfather?"
Oh dear. Well, I guess you were the youngest of quite a few.
Yes, yes.
Youngest of 7.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway,
But he was a lovely man, and if anyone, he was always in a good deal of pain. But if anyone said, "Well, how are you today, Mr. Skinner?" he'd say, "Well, still in the land of the living and living to praise the Lord."
Mm.
He was very cheerful.
So all your family, going back on the Skinner side, were all Christians as far back as you can remember?
as far as we know,
Yes.
and certainly the Towels, they went to chapel and all sang in the choir, Grandfather Towel right up to his dying day, and and Mum's brothers, especially Uncle Bill
Towel.
Towel.
Uncle Bill Towel.
He sang in the choir bass. He sang bass.
A lovely bass voice.
All his life, but from when he came out to Australia till the day he died, he sang bass in the choir and loved it. And Mum thought a lot of her brothers. She thought a lot of her sisters too, but you see, she had to leave them behind.
Which was a real little mother to her brothers when they came to Australia.
And they'd come to her for advice. And Uncle Alf, right up to the time that he went, he loved to come and see Mum,
Yes.
and she loved to see him.
And so did Uncle
Bill,
Bill
yes,
Towell,
they were very
yes.
true to each other. And that made us a kind of community, you know, looking
An
back on it.
extended family.
Yes.
It was lovely
We
for
had
Elsie
aunts
and
and
I.
uncles.
It was lovely for Elsie and I. Not that we sort of loved them all in a sense. Sometimes they'd get on our nerves and we would on theirs, you know, but actually we did. We loved them, and there was a lovely feeling, a community
Oh,
feeling,
yes,
wasn't
there
it?
was.
Yes.
Yes. And we loved going over to
We were
Uncle
very
Alf's.
fortunate to
We-
have that.
Yeah, even as we were growing up.
Mm.
It was nice to have cousins, and some of the cousins would give us a little more than cousinly kisses occasionally. And we didn't exactly mind.
Quite a number of them flirted with us a bit, didn't
They
they?
did.
But yet we knew it was just in the cousinly sort of way.
Yes. We did plenty of singing around the piano, and
Yes.
Eddie Towell, one of the youngest of Uncle Alf's, he'd sing Three Fishes Went Sailing Out into the West. It was very sad.
Very sad.
Very sad.
Yes.
And our brother Bill, of course, he was a great one at singing. We could hear Bill singing on the farm when he was working. And we'd ring the bell at midday, always at midday we'd ring the bell, and away in the distance you could hear Bill say, "Oh, oh."
And then he used to yodel, Bill, and there's not many people yodel.
No, but
He
he
used
could
to
yodel well.
Yes.
You could hear him
Yes.
coming and you'd think, oh,
Yes.
you know, it's time to pour off the vegetables and make the gravy. The only thing is he'd meet his friend, one of the Brownings, just as he got to the barbed wire fence. And there'd be a lot of talk before finally
Right.
he came into dinner.
He had a loud voice, did he?
Yes, and he wasn't the sort that you could say, Bill, dinner's ready. You had to wait till he came. And he was so thirsty from the work that he'd turn on the tap and have a big billy can, wouldn't he?
Yes.
And he'd drink the water,
And
drink it,
sometimes he'd make
a lemon drink.
From
the
several,
common
half a
lemons.
dozen lemons, and he'd put into the billy can, and then he'd put soda and it'd be going all over the
Because
place.
we didn't know what it
Baking
was to
soda.
have, drinks that fizzed
Cool drinks.
like cool
But it was
drinks.
lovely to drink, and plenty of sugar in it, and while it was all fizzing, we'd all have a drink. But he did everything heartily, everything in a big way, you know.
Yes.
And,
Even sometimes at breakfast he'd say, oh, move aside, you don't know how to do it properly. And he'd make up a complete big mixture of sort of scrambled eggs with all kinds in it. There was bits of bacon and tomatoes and a great big frying pan, and it'd be whirling round, this great big mass.
And of course, and he fed his horses far too much, corn and sharp, and they'd be rearing and going on. Something.
So he's a very physical sort of person.
Oh, very, yes, yes, and he could always do it a little better than we could, you see. So we let him have his way. But
And when we got a little Doral, a little Pomeranian, we were learning to cook then, and we'd say, we'd make something. We'd say, this is new, Bill, and he'd say, well, I'll give you a little bit to the dog.
to Lovey Poncer.
Yes, and if she doesn't eat it, oh no, it's not fit for human consumption. And of course, she's only a little lap dog, and she'd just give a little sniff and that'd be over, and he'd make out, And he was really teasing us.
Yeah.
He was teasing us, and we got quite upset, but he really was only teasing us.
Yes.
The one time when he wasn't teasing, we were up on the roof, right up on the roof of this house, and a great, slanting.
And an unsealed kitchen, he was sitting eating
and
his
he
meal.
was having meal, and he's singing out,
Come down from there, you twins. And we said, we won't. He said, I'll see about that. You never saw twins scramble down from their lofty positions quicker.
Well, what did he do? He started coming up.
Yeah, if he had, we'd have been...
I think he had a rope to give us a
Yes, I think he did.
We stayed not on the order of our going. We knew when he meant it.
Did he sort of take over the father role when you're...
To a certain extent,
Father died?
yes, he did, to a certain extent.
Mm.
And he was very generous, really, a generous man, would give anything away, and didn't like charging for it. And it was like, and everything he did so heartily. You see, he saw us struggling to put up a wire netting to train sweet peas on. He said, oh, you don't know how to do those. I'll show you how to do it. So he dug a great, huge trench, and he put the wire beautifully, of course, with it, and they grew so tall, we had to get a ladder to get up to the blooms at the top. You see, they grew so enormously, and then there were so many we couldn't hope to sell them, the few that you might sell. So, of course, he'd give them away or take them to the hospital, probably an embarrassment of riches to them. He'd go out to Clarence Peak. He'd take picnic parties out, you see, to Clarence Peak, and they'd go up on the side where all the beautiful tree ferns and the orchids and so on grew. And in those days, there wasn't a ban against taking them. So he'd get some, what are they? Elkhorns and staghorns, and he'd bring them home, and all round McLean to this very day,
People still have them.
still have great clumps of staghorns and elkhorns that Bill had
Yes,
given.
and in those days when the McLean show was on, now of course they have modern methods. They have big urns and so forth, and a big hall to do it all in. But to buy it in those days, Bill would bring big load of wood, and he'd keep the fire going, and everybody could come for a billy of hot water. I think it was a shilling for a thing of hot water, wasn't it?
That'd be sixpence.
Sixpence. And it went toward the hospital. It went toward the hospital. So that was his share, and he'd worked so hard, and people thought well of him, really.
And what happened to him in the end?
Oh, well, it was a sad story, really. Yeah, he went into hospital. He'd been in hospital many times during his lifetime, and when he was tired of it, he'd just walk out. He'd dismiss himself and go home. They understood him, the doctor didn't try to get him back, and no one seemed to mind, but he'd just walk out. And then he became ill, and they said he'd need to come to Sydney for an operation. Well, he'd never been away from Maclean. He'd only been as far as Grafton and perhaps Lismore, and nowhere further than that. And the thought of coming down, I suppose that was partly it. And anyway, he thought he was done. And
he had had a stroke, a slight stroke.
No, old was he?
In his 70s, his late 70s, wasn't he?
No, not that old.
No.
So he was quite healthy until he was into his...
And not healthy, in a lot of pain with rheumatism like his father before him, and crippled with it.
Yes.
He'd got that he could hardly get out of the sulky when he'd come in.
Oh no, some days after Mother left, he missed Mother terribly. And then when I went to live in Mother's place, he used to come in, and I couldn't take Mum's place, but I tried to fill in for him. On his bad days, he couldn't get out of the sulky. I'd have to go out. And on his bad days, he was hard to live with. If he could get in, he wasn't very happy at all. He'd be saying some bad words. And Peter was only a little chap then, and I had to say one day, "Oh, Bill, don't swear like that in front of Peter." But on his good days, he was different altogether, and I used to cash in on that, and I'd say to Peter, "Oh, you sing to Uncle Bill there." So Peter'd running over on H-O-P-P-Y, you know, and all this, and the tears would be running down Bill's face, you know, to touch him very much. But anyway, Anne was working at the hospital at the time. Bill was in hospital, and Anne came home about 11 o'clock in the morning, and I said, as soon as I saw Anne, I said, "What has Bill done?" Straight away, I said, "What has Bill done?" And he said, he threw himself off the balcony at the hospital. So I went up, and he was still alive, and he was looking at me, you know, his eyes were trying to say, you know, and I said, "Look, it's all right, Bill, I know, I understand, dear, and God understands, I know, don't worry." I could see, you know, his eyes were pathetic, but anyway, he died that way. And it was so sad.
I guess being so active all his life, he couldn't stand being...
And it turns out, doesn't it, that it was at dinner time, and he passed through the wards and said a kindly word to each one as he passed, because everyone knew
I think he deliberately thought about it.
Yes.
He thought that he'd been in such pain, and he also, I spoke to the doctor after about it, and the doctor said that he had had a stroke, and he said that invariably there is brain damage with a stroke, and that he thinks that was the root cause of it. But also, although that's so, maybe so, he had thought about it, because they were still having their dinner in the men's ward as he went through, and he asked them how they were getting on, you know, and all this sort of thing, and very quietly for Bill, because he did everything in a big way usually, and in a loud way, that he must have deliberately done that. And it was very sad.
There was no future for him. He could only be a burden, you know, and he wasn't going to leave his home and come to the big city that he'd never been to. So
and he wouldn't want to be any trouble to anybody.
He
loved giving things.
But he didn't like receiving. He could never receive anything graciously.
If you gave him a present, he was almost,
cross with you.
yes, almost
What did you
cross.
want to do that for?
You
know,
didn't
that
have to
kind
do that.
Mm.
And that sort of thing. He couldn't sort of take things, but he loved to give. And when he died, it was amazing how McLean turned out, because they knew him, really, how generous he was and all that. And
the many notes of thanks that Doris found in that
Oh,
drawer
yes.
in his home.
yes, before that, he left you know, the little place to Anne and I. And so when I went out to see to things, well, the number of little thank you notes and things from people, from the sisters at the convent for wood, from the doctors, from different
Salvation
ones.
Army.
Yes,
Salvation Army.
yes. It was just amazing, really. It spoke for itself.
He came to my wedding, you know, and the tears running down his face at the wedding. But after, of course, all big talk to Apple, you know, you take good care of her or else. You know, all the night, if Apple wouldn't have. But he gave me a Marcella quilt, which was quite expensive, and a lovely eiderdown, which was I had for many years. I still have the eider of it in other covers, the original real eiderdown that he gave me. A lovely gold one it was, and we're very grateful for it at the Niliquin.
He's very generous.
Yes.
Yes, he's very generous.
Very kind man. But of course his life was one of disappointment. You know, not only because he couldn't go to the war and wanted to.
Why couldn't he go to the war?
Because he had bad operations, and Dr. L. Page, who was his doctor in Grafton, wouldn't pass him. He tried in Maclean. He tried 3 times in Grafton, and they wouldn't pass him because he'd had gallstones as well, and he'd had a rupture that couldn't be corrected, as well as bad operations that he'd had. And he was crippled, even then, with rheumatism, and they wouldn't pass him, which was a real shame because he was wanting to go, and he was jealous of John, who could go and didn't really want to. He only went out of a sense of duty. And of course, to make it so much worse, a lot of the women down the street were handing out the white feather, and he wouldn't wear the rejection badge, which he should have worn, to show that he'd tried. He felt it was a bit of an insult to his manhood, being such a big, burly-looking fellow, and he wouldn't wear it. And then, of course, finally, when the minister on the Sunday night preached about those big louts in the back seat, and he was one of them. And of course, the next day he went in, and he said the minister's wife came to the door, and he said, "Is the minister there?" She said yes. He said, "Well, ask him to come out here." She paled visibly and went inside. He said, "Did you or did you not call the men in the back seat louts last night?" He said, "Oh, I did." And Bill said, "Well, you should have found out some details first." He said, "Oh, I've tried 3 times to enlist, and I've been rejected." And the minister said, and Bill said, "Anyway, why don't you go?" Well, the minister didn't like being bearded in his own den, so he said, "Oh, well, I have a wife and children." So they were talking of conscription even then, World War One, trying to bring it in, you see. But Bill, it would have been better if he could have gone.
So that's the last time he went to church?
And he didn't ever go. And
How old was he then?
Oh, he'd have been in his about 28, I think, don't you?
He still did all the work for the Salvation Army and things like that
yes,
afterwards.
and Church of England, and he used to go sometimes to church out at Tolumi in a hall, which was you know, each church would take a turn of having him. He'd go to those services.
Salvation Army would go.
Well, he just
Church
wouldn't
of
go to the
England.
established church.
No.
From then on, it made him bitter, and of course he loved this girl, Minnie Engett. He loved her.
Sorry, who?
Her name was Minnie Engett.
Oh, yeah.
And she had 2 sisters. One of them would have loved Bill. Her name was Lil. She was gentle. And then there was the older one. They were lovely women. They were of German origin and cooked something beautiful. And made my wedding cake, by the way, for me. and also gave me a tablecloth for a wedding present for dear souls. But the middle one, Minnie, Bill loved her, and I think he thought she was his girl. But she had to marry in a hurry, a Mr. North. But of course Bill wouldn't leave it at that, you see. And it must have been with Mr. North's consent, because they were good friends to their dying day on both sides, Mr. and Mrs. North.